We won't wait. We won't run. We'll conjure up the courage we need to create solutions for our homeland.
Our Africa.
With our courage, we will innovate for our time.
We will raise up a new generation of independent actors who, with us, will build a new tomorrow.
We won't wait. We won't run.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.
Welcome to #DIY Africa, presented by the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and GemFest.
So hello everyone, and a warm welcome to GemFest, co-hosted along with the Civic Tech Innovation Forum, CTIN. Thank you for joining us from all across the continent and the rest of the world for this year's festival under the DIY Africa theme. My name is Rose Kimani. I work as project officer at Deutsche Welle Academy, and will be facilitating this panel discussion titled Media Viability from an East African Perspective. We hope you'll leave this knowledge sharing discussion with a better understanding of pathways to media viability, particularly from an East African perspective. But what exactly is media viability? I can broadly summarize it as producing quality content in a sustainable way. In this session, we hope to get further into questions like, what are some of the practical ways that media organizations can prepare strategy for their organizations to be viable? Should organizations be looking at mixed revenue models for survival, and so on? So our panelists are practitioners and researchers who will break this down further for us through sharing their experiences and knowledge. But before I introduce them, a few more details about this session. The session is co-hosted by JamLab and CTIN in partnership with the Media Innovation Center at Aga Khan University in Kenya. If you can, please share and tweet today's conversation on social media using the hashtag JamFest Africa 2021 and DIY Africa. We really want this discussion to be interactive, so please use the Q&A function for any questions directed to our speakers. And for comments and queries, please use the chat function. Just so that you're aware, this session is being recorded and will be publicly available on our various digital platforms in different formats. So now on to our panelists, whom it gives me great pleasure to introduce. Joining me today is Caleb Okereke. He's a managing editor at Minority Africa in Uganda, which is a platform for stories on minorities by minorities, and he'll tell us more about this. Welcome, Caleb. Our next panelist is Alea Kasam. She's the co-founder of the Lamb Sisterhood in Kenya, which has been making waves on the storytelling and art scene in Kenya and beyond since 2018. And both of these panelists are also innovators in residence at the Media Innovation Center in Nairobi. Our third panelist is Hesbon Hansen Owila. He's a research associate at the Graduate School of Media and Communications in Aga Khan University in Kenya. And he wears many hats, but most relevant for our discussion today is that he's researching on the East African media viability landscape, and he's also actively involved in the Innovators in Residence program. So this is just a sneak preview of these amazing panelists. Their full bios are available on the GemFest website, so just hop on there and check on them. So we'll start by hearing a bit more about the Innovators in Residence program, and then get into an in-depth discussion of the business models and ideas that Minority Africa and the Lamb Sisterhood are exploring for media viability. After the input from the panelists, there will be room for questions from the audience as the discussion continues. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll keep taking them as we go. So Hesbon, I'll start with you. The Media Innovation Center has, for the past few years, focused on strengthening media viability in East Africa. And one of the ways is by supporting promising ideas through the Innovators in Residence program. I know that this year's call for innovators has recently closed. And I'm sure there's someone in our audience asking themselves, what exactly is this Innovators in Residence program? Who is it for? Why does it exist? So could you tell us a bit more about the program, how it's progressing, and why this program exists in the first place?
Thank you, Rose. I hope you'll allow me to share my screen briefly. Briefly, the Innovators in Residence is our flagship project here at the Media Innovation Center at Aga Khan University. And what we do is that we support innovative ideas, journalistic ideas that are tinkering with new forms of storytelling, new formats of engaging the audience, and anything that expands that public space and makes the society, much more informed. So since 2019, we've had, 3 cohorts. We are in the process of admitting the 3rd cohort. And the 3rd cohort will be made up of 9 innovators in residence from the entire East African region. That's Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So I think I need to be brief on where we are, because we'll have more discussions as we go. So the call that we just closed attracted 282 applicants from Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. The breakdown is, as you can see on your screen, Kenya had 76, Uganda, shocked of us by having 117 applicants, and then we had 89 from Tanzania. The long and short of this is that we had to sieve through the applications and, just get the applications that are journalistic in nature. So in the end, we ended up with 226 applications. So we are still going through this just to sieve and see which applications fit within which aspects of the media. Let me give you a sneak preview of what we had last year, which gives much more detailed picture of the kind of media innovations that we have in East Africa. So this is what we had in our 2nd cohort. Again, our 2nd cohort was targeting Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We had 130 applications from Kenya. We had 52 from Uganda and 55 from Tanzania. All these applications were actually anchored on 4 main areas. So the first area was content. A lot of applications were looking at content in terms of culture, the African stories, community issues. Basically, what this tells you is that most of these applications were looking at a niche in terms of producing, very quality content that are financially sustainable within these areas of content. So there is local content, there is politics, there is sports, tourism, there is business and financial matters. And then there was also a lot of applications on women and children and gender issues. But the bulk of the applications were basically on local content and education and stuff to do with training the community. The second category was on media house and media platforms. So a lot of applications were tinkering with new ways of generating revenue for media houses. So the applications on advertising and revenue provisions, the applications on media platforms, and supporting different, marginalized content on these media platforms. The 3rd area was in new media. Again, received quite a lot of attention. A lot of applicants were looking at new media platforms as a platform for new ways of telling stories. And then lastly, we had a few applications, that were targeting young people. Either they were targeting young people as content consumers, or they were basically youth-led, media initiatives that were fairly innovative. So that's the landscape as it is. But as Rose has said, there's a lot more that we do. This is just the landscape of the media innovation, the Innovators in Residence, which is one of our flagship programs. We'll get into the granular details on what we do as far as research is concerned, other activities that we're involved in, what research is saying about, media viability in East Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Husband, for that overview. I hope this makes it clearer what the Innovators in Residence program is about. And yeah, as I mentioned, Alea and Caleb were both successful applicants in 2020 for the Innovators in Residence program. So I think we could go over directly to the two of you and already ask, maybe I'll start with you, Caleb. Now that viability is on our minds, what is Minority Africa focusing on? What would you say is unique about the business model that Minority Africa is using, or about the content? Yeah, what would you say makes you stand out?
Thanks, Rose. I think what we're currently trying to do, first of all, as you mentioned, we're an online publication that's using data-driven multimedia journalism to tell mostly solutions minority stories from across Africa. So the very first things that make us unique is, one, we're doing minority stories, which we believe are not given as much priority in mainstream or legacy media. The second thing is that we're doing solution journalism, which is a kind of reporting that highlights responses to problems as opposed to just problems alone. And we think that that's particularly important when covering minorities, because if you're part of a group that has so often been covered from the lens of, of the problem, it's important for us to also show how you're responding. We don't think that people passively experience problems, and we're very deliberate about our reporting, like highlighting how people respond to these problems. The third thing that's unique about us, I would say, is the fact that we prioritize editorial control of minorities. So the fact that we want to put minorities at the helm or at the forefront of telling and editing their own stories, both from the story gathering, we try to work with as many journalists from the communities that they cover as often as possible. And when we can't, we have section editors for most of our desks that are from the minority groups they cover as well. So we have a women's editor, section minorities editor, and this sort of helps us ensure that at the editorial level, what's going out has been seen by somebody from that minority group. The fourth thing I would say that makes us perhaps unique is the fact that we're ad free. We don't believe in ads, and we think that it's simply because ads can, first of all, we don't like how they look, but also just because they can sort of detract from the story and control the story as well. We cover very sensitive issues, and would often, even if not yet, but often in future, come head to head with big corporations and people. So we're trying our best to stay away from an ad-driven model. We also don't believe in a subscription model. We think that a lot of the times content about minorities is often hidden behind like paywalls. So it makes no sense for you to write a story about, let's say, like a community in Uganda who's suffering from climate change impact if they can access the story because it's hidden behind a paywall. So ad-free, no subscription, no paywalls. And we've been doing this because we run a not-for-profit newsroom primarily, and we're also sort of been thinking increasingly about how could we make money. And I think it's good to state that when I started Minority Africa at first, it was just me, and I wasn't thinking of it as like something that could be viable. I was thinking of it just like it was a passion project. I wanted to see more minority stories told, and I said I was very passionate to do it. And I think getting into AKU's program, even before the program, right? AKU did so many trainings that I started to attend, before the actual program, that made me see, we actually have to build something that's viable and sustainable. And since then, we started to think of how we can generate revenue models. And one of the revenue models we've come up with is e-learning courses. We've done a few language series. We had a language series that sort of taught people about like abolishing oppressive language, from sexist language to racist language to homophobic language. And per our numbers, this series did very well. And so we realized that people actually wanted to learn something, right? And so hence we started to build Minority Africa Learn, which is a platform that will offer short courses on minority issues and is one of our strongest revenue models. But I think with Learn, what we've learned, because we haven't launched yet, is it's taken so much time to even just design the experience of the platform, build the curriculum, liaise with facilitators. So what we're doing in the meantime is a project called Advance. And with Advance, we're trying to spread minority stories to newsrooms across the world at national level, international level, regional level, and basically have these newsrooms pay us to help them make the coverage more diverse and inclusive, which is one of our fastest reading models, and to then use the the money we get from that to then support the publication as is. Yes.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of stuff to unpack, but thank you for just starting us off. And quite interesting that you chose to go the ad-free way and that you're moving over editorial control to other people. Maybe I can link this to Alea and how you engage your communities. I know that your focus is on storytelling. And I think one of my questions would be, how would you say that your work model, or even just the focus on storytelling, how does it feed into the current media landscape? How does it feed into media viability? What are you doing differently?
Thank you so much, Rose. So much of what Caleb talked about really resonated, I think, with us as well. And so the Lamb Sisterhood, we fill the world with stories for African women to feel seen, heard, and beloved. And at the core already, that's very distinct from what mainstream media is doing, where content for women it tends to be either very lifestyle oriented or very, sort of lacking in nuance. I think, and certainly the way that the Lamb Sisterhood came together, myself and my co-founders, Laura Ikumbo and Anne Mora, was in a stage show called Brazen, which was telling the stories of extraordinary Kenyan women from our history. And really it was seeking to find ourselves in our histories, which unfortunately have been so erased from national memory. And in doing that, we sort of discovered not only a hunger for these stories, but we also discovered how important they were. Joyce Nyairo talks about, there's this quote she has, which we always reference. And I think it's true for Kenya, and I think it's true probably for a lot of the continent. So she says, because our national archives are so depleted and state-inscribed amnesia is so entrenched, we need our life writing to fill in the gaps of every facet of our history: political, economic, social, cultural, and intellectual. And so the Lamb Sisterhood is not a media house in the traditional form. We're not traditional journalists or reporters. We really are storytellers. And so I'm grateful for that framing, Rose. And what we're trying to do now within as innovators in residence is kind of creating the Brazen universe. And what that will be is a multi and hypermedia platform that shares the life stories of extraordinary African women who've shaped our reality. I don't think we're the first, and I don't think we're the only. And also, I know that that our work is necessary, and also it is in conversation with others that are doing this work, and that there is space for all of us to do this work in conversation with each other. We are still discovering what our viability is. One of the things, we came together as storytellers, and now we are entrepreneurs. And so even though we came together with the lens of wanting to create content, we're now, being forced to think about viability models in order to enable us to continue creating that content. So one of our discoveries within the Media Innovation program has been that we are a content studio, which means that actually we're developing content that is deeply researched and expensive. It takes time to develop. It's not volume-based. And so what's going to happen is we imagine that this is content that we will sell eventually to buyers. So it won't be the consumer that buys it. It will be the buyer who has their own platform. Perhaps a Spotify, for example, might buy the podcast. So that's one stream that we're kind of exploring right now. What we're really finding is that because our why is so clear, which is, filling the world with stories for African women to feel seen, heard, and beloved. By the way, beloved is the magic sauce, because many organizations claim to make work for women to feel seen, but the beloved is the thing that is really important to us. Oh my gosh, and I lost my train of thought in the beloved. I think my mind just went to, I felt so beloved myself. I kind of lost my train of thought. I will, eventually I'll find it and I'll come back to it. I hope that answered your question, Rose. Oh, wait, I remembered it. Aha. So because the work that we're trying to do, is so clear to us, our why is so clear to us, the medium is not as important. So we work in podcast, we work in film, we work in theater, we work, on the page, which means that we're nimble, and so we can adjust and take advantage of opportunities, in different mediums, and we're not tied to one medium. And I think that might be one of our strategies that really helps in keeping us going, because we're able to kind of exploit opportunities as they arrive and be kind of quick on our feet, so to speak.
I like that way of thinking, the nimble part of it. Caleb, I don't know if this speaks to you in any way, just the model that LAM Sisterhood is using, if you can see any links between what they're doing and what Minority Africa is doing, just fast thoughts on that, if any.
I think I like the word beloved very much, and I think that now that I said it, I realized it is something that we're also trying to do as well, like with making minorities feel not just seen but also beloved. So one of our value propositions is to create a community, right? And I always say that our primary audience first is the minorities, for them to see themselves represented in media in a way that they probably have never been before, right? With agency, with the level of like activity we give them, and saying you can actually take charge of your own stories. So I'd say that's the first link I can see. And also I see a nexus between when she talks about selling content, not to the consumer, but to like content studios who then sell to the consumer. And that's sort of what we're doing. I think for us, the priority is ensuring that minorities can access their content. So if anyone should pay for them, it shouldn't be they themselves, to be honest. It should be the capitalist world as we know it. Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed in taking on the capitalist world as we go. Yeah. But really, really thought-provoking, inspiring thoughts so far. And so Hesbon, from your position as a researcher on media viability, and now that we say, and also what Alea has mentioned, that yes, they are producing content, there is a reason why, and now the struggle is finding out a way to stay viable. What does the innovation and viability landscape look like in East Africa, and why would you say viability or innovation is important?
I think just to begin with, Alea and the LAM Sisterhood, and the fact that they are storytellers. And I think journalism in itself is just the art of storytelling. And good storytellers would always tell the stories. But you're increasingly living in a world where, there's a dearth of good storytellers simply because of limited resources to fund good stories. And I think that's where the East African media landscape is, that a lot of emergent innovators who are telling good stories, amazing journalistic stories that have a public interest dimension, are so consumed in the art of, telling good stories. And there are many in Kenya that are good at it. Look at the number of innovators in residence applications that we got. These are just people who are interested in telling the stories, and they're looking at viable ways of telling the story without necessarily, focusing on the advertising model. So what really does that say about the landscape? Now, looking at studies that have been done all over and just piecing together the gap that I think, we probably may need to address in supporting new and innovative stories that are viable, and viability looked at in terms of quality content and financial sustainability. There's a sense in which more training and coaching for content producers needs to focus on, sales and marketing. Marketers will tell you that, a good product that is not known, cannot sell, and I think journalism also has to be looked at like that this is a public good product, good story, The other thing is, how do you get the story to the end consumers? And that's a niche that training, coaching, and mentorship has increasingly been attending to, and part of what you're doing at the Media Innovation Center. But to come back to your question, what the landscape looks like in East Africa, a lot of our research has focused on Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And of course, I think because we started strongly in Kenya, we have a lot of research that has been done in Kenya. But looking at the three countries, the media landscape is diverse. Kenya is fairly diverse, most advanced of the three East African countries. Digital penetration is very high. Therefore, you have terrestrial television, and majority of the television stations in Kenya have also moved on the digital platform. So they are digital standalone TVs. Uganda, again, very diverse with different newspapers and magazines. The broadcast sector is growing. The highest number of radio stations in East Africa is in Uganda as a country. Actually, more than 70% of those radio stations are either owned by individuals who are politicians or businessmen. But still, what that tells you is that there's growth in that sector. The thing about that growth is that it has eaten into the advertising pie. So they have plurality of media, but then the advertising pie has not grown. So they suffer the same issues of how do you generate content to keep producing quality content that is of public good. Tanzania, vibrant, and I think the unique thing about the landscape in Tanzania is that it has the most number of print publications, 226 from the latest data that we had. And that talks of a very vibrant media landscape. But even with this vibrancy, I think the economic downturn, the digital disruption, and lately the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the revenue streams going into these media houses. So the latest study that we are working on right now is giving us pointers towards a very diversified revenue model for most of these media houses. But that comes with a challenge, because the findings also seem to indicate that the more you diversify the revenues, the more it reaches a point where the costs of diversification of that revenues reaches that point that economists talk of as the level of marginal diminishing returns. So the returns are not as much. But there are also mitigating factors. There are factors. There are also factors that affect, the media viability landscape in East Africa. So if we look at Kenya, for instance, I think the biggest issue that our data is showing in Kenya, the three reports that we just published, is that the media in Kenya is affected more so by the concentrated ownership and the close ties that both the economic elites, the people who own the media, have with the political elites. And to a large extent, they have this stranglehold on the media, which is broadly concentrated in six major conglomerates in Kenya. So that tells you that for the Kenyan media landscape to be a lot more vibrant in terms of quality content, we need to have more producers outside the traditional six. Because today, 95% of the audience share and 97% of the advertising revenue share is in the hands of the six media houses. So Kenyans, to a large extent, irrespective of whether you're watching one radio station or the other, or one publication or the other, you're likely to be consuming content from just six editorial routes in this country. And that is having a bearing on the viability of the media, not necessarily in terms of financial viability, but content. Is it quality enough? Can these media houses that are owned by a few people report, robustly about, the clique of conglomerates that own them because they have interest in other areas? Then in Uganda is sort of very interesting because, again, it has a very plural media landscape. But then the top two media conglomerates in Uganda, one is part of a conglomerate that is wide in East Africa. And then the second one is a commercial entity owned by the government. So there is that aspect of, most media houses in Tanzania sort of straddling this line between their corporate and commercial interests and not interfering with the political dynamics of the country. Because there is a lot of politics. There's a lot of gray areas in Uganda. There are laws. Those laws are not even publicized. So even individuals in this country find it hard to understand what is right and what is not right. But critically, with the growth of the media on the digital platform in Uganda, you also realize that there has been a slowdown occasioned by the 0.05 USD social media tax per day. So that economic boost that comes with access to the internet and the fact that it also gives the media and consumers a platform to consume content has pretty much been slowed down by this tax. Uganda, not Tanzania, again, fairly white country. Media landscape is doing fairly well. It's one of the interesting things about Tanzania is that most of the Tanzanians are not very critical when the establishment clamps down on the media, and the studies have shown that they feel that the media should not report, so much on the negatives of, the establishment. And here I'm talking about the government. And I think there's a sense in which Tanzanians in their social setup are apprehensive of a very critical, overbearing media. But I think the biggest thing that is affecting media landscape in Tanzania, and this is not my thinking, this is what data is showing. First of all, there's also concentration in Tanzania. I think the media is owned by a few private entities, and then a few media entities that are owned by political parties, including the opposition political party. And then secondly, and I think the most overbearing, impact on media viability today in Tanzania is the pieces of legislation that have been enacted, in the last 6 or so years. They've made ownership and production of content on the digital platform way too expensive for local content producers. They've instituted fairly draconian, I would say, pieces of legislation that frustrates not just freedom of the media, but even freedom of the expression. And there's a sense in which, members of the civil society, people from the academy, and just critical voices and dissenting voices, muting themselves and, engaging in what we call self-censorship because of the pieces of legislation that have been enacted. But as I've told you, we have studies that are showing that media outlets in these 3 countries are working towards diversification of revenues, moving away from the advertising model. And we've seen in Kenya, in Uganda, media houses are working on paywalls, content that the end consumer can pay for. And those are very encouraging signs. There is also increase in internet penetration in Kenya. Of course, Kenya is way high at 85. And then we are seeing progress in Uganda and Tanzania. And lastly, I think, especially in Kenya and Tanzania, the civil society and different organizations like Editors Guild, the Association of Kenyan Journalists, equivalents in Tanzania like the, TMF, they're working so hard to professionalize and fight for the rights of journalists, which is a very encouraging, pathway for viability of these media outlets.
Okay.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much for that detailed, in-depth picture of the landscape in the 3 countries. I think this is very helpful in even just us helping to contextualize the environment in which the innovators are working in, and generally people working in the media are facing. So maybe just latching onto something that you said about the social media tax in Uganda. Caleb, with Minority Africa operating mostly digital platform out of Uganda. Would you say that this has had any impact on the kind of audience outreach you've been able to have, or even just on putting up your work and getting feedback from the audience? Has this been an issue for you?
I had to put up my video because the internet is a bit shaky, but
Okay, as we wait for Caleb to come back on, maybe I'll just move on to you, Alea, about the media landscape that Hesbon has just described. He's talked about politics, about interference legally and in other ways. Would you say that you've had any issues with either the legal aspect or the political aspect when you do your work as the Lamb Sisterhood?
That's a great question, Rose. You know, right now we're small enough that we get away with a lot. And I think that's one of the great advantages of being a very niche media house, is that you can say things and you are accountable to your community. And because we are accountable to our community, it is essential for us to say the things that mainstream media is unable to or unwilling to. And so, for example, when the former President Moi passed away, with Baraza Media Lab, we held an alternative mourning because, as is so often the case, as definitely in Kenya, when a big man passes away, it's like his sins were all washed away, and we only remember him for the good that he did, and let his soul rest in peace. And all the people that he affected, you know, it's erased. And we refused for that to be the dominant narrative, and we refused for the other side, the other stories to be left untold. And so we held space for the stories that mainstream media were unable to hold space for. You know, our work is political, but it's political. I mean, first and foremost, we're feminist storytellers. So with that lens, it's the personal is political. So we're political with a small p, but we're also political with the big P, you know, which is to say the initial stage show Brazen told the stories of women who had been involved in our political struggles since pre-colonialism, from Mekatilili Wamenza, who led one of the successful uprisings against the colonizers at the age of 70, escaped prison twice, walked over 1,000 kilometers to get home. And the reason she did that was it was a rising of consciousness. She was standing for an ideology. This was not just war, you know. But of course, because, you know, Field Marshal Muthoni wa Kirima, who is the same rank as Dedan Kimathi, from the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, spent over a decade fighting for independence, was called the Weaver Bird because of her strategic mind. And up until 2018, didn't even have an alleyway named after her. So we are also operating in an extraordinarily patriarchal society that thinks that women's stories and minority stories generally aren't important. And so we're just sort of small birds buzzing away. And you know, I think what's really encouraging to me, and even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, am I going to get into trouble for saying this? But what's exciting to me is how many small niche storytellers, journalists, reporters, media organizations are out there challenging that and doing extremely political work, reframing what it means, what political work means, and are in allyship with one another. You know, so behind the scenes, we're in allyship and we're in conversation with one another. So we may not appear to be big like the big media houses. That's not to say the impact is not happening. That's not to say that the landscape isn't changing. It's just that the eyes are not on us yet.
Okay. And so then, looking at it from another perspective, looking at the eyes that are on you, do you see it as a challenge to keep your editorial independence now that you're a content studio that has to address the needs of its clients? How do you balance that with making sure that your editorial independence is not compromised?
You know, our needs, our clients are African women, and our work is always in service to them. If there's a point in which they say the work that you're doing is causing harm, then we need to think to ourselves, what are we doing this? What is the purpose of this work? And so I don't think that, I don't see editorial independence being as much of a challenge for us yet. I think we'll see as things move along, you know, but in this moment, that's not our primary concern. Because our audience is so specific, and because we are also we are African women ourselves, you know, that if there's a clash, then I think we have to really think for ourselves, what are we doing wrong? Yeah.
Okay, well put. And I see a comment from Noah saying that we may not be like other big media houses, but this does not mean that our impact is not felt. I think you have just summarized it so well. And I don't know, Caleb, are you back?
I believe I am.
Ah, great. Yeah, so back to the question that I had asked about your experience, Minority Africa's experience with social media tax, and your audiences, and how you manage that.
I think generally what I would say has been had a greater impact on us would be because the tax was recently scrapped, I think 2 months ago. So, but what happened now is there's a new data tax, right? So there's a 12% data tax, which means if your internet cost 100,000 before, now it costs 112,000. But what I would say would notice to be most impactful would be the Facebook ban, because I mean, with the tax, we all paid the tax, to be honest. And we started 2019 November, which we ran for like a year, I think. And then there was this social media shutdown in January during the elections, which was the first time we realized that we sort of had to democratize our social media access, because most of the content was in Uganda. It meant that we couldn't post anything during the elections. We were just basically handicapped. And then after that, we started to think of how to sort of spread our social media access. But with the Facebook ban, for instance, what we've seen now is you can access Facebook without a VPN, and even more than you need a stronger VPN. So we've seen our user numbers decline, greatly. People who are in Uganda who would usually comment on our Facebook posts, we're reaching less and less people on Facebook than normal. And even things like uploading a video on Facebook, which sounds very easy, right, is like Herculean when you're doing it with a VPN, or when you have to send to someone else somewhere to then upload, on Facebook. But whereas we're mostly content on this side. So I would say that there's so much for us. There's so much importance that is placed on access, right? So there's no point of the stories we're telling if people can't access them. And so we see things like the Facebook ban, whether it's the social media tax, whether it's an internet shutdown. Whenever access for us is sort of challenged or threatened, it impedes both on how we deliver our news stories, but also on those who sort of access our news stories. And Facebook was the primary channel for us before. Now I would say Instagram is our biggest platform, other than Facebook, especially this year. We've grown our Instagram exponentially, I think. And I think that's in so many ways because it's just, you can just open it in Instagram and use it, right? As opposed to Facebook where you have to put on a VPN and then it's still slow and not as fast as normal. So yeah.
Okay, you seem to be the definition of nimble, as Alea was putting it, just going with the situation and adapting as you go. There's a question to Hesbon. When you are presenting the innovators in residence, you did say that Uganda surprised you by the number of applications that were received this year. Could you shed more light on this?
Well, I didn't say surprise in a negative way, surprise in a pleasant way. Now, I think there were a lot of challenges that were, going on in Uganda, COVID. I think they had the highest number of lockdowns in East Africa. And then, of course, there is this belief that Kenya is the tech hub, the heart of innovation in East Africa. But then you look at the numbers, we had 117 from Uganda. And remember, the third cohort for the innovators in residence is dual. So we are looking for innovators within the urban areas and innovators in the rural areas, and specifically with innovations that are targeting the rural area with public good journalism. So what happened is that in Uganda, after the cleanup, we still ended up with 98. And that tells you that there were a lot, and of course, out of this 98, 51 were from the rural areas. So you look at the three countries. Uganda gave us the highest number of innovative ideas from the rural area and targeting the rural media landscape, which speaks a lot to the uptake of information that builds individuals within the society. And the overarching goal of the Media Futures project is to bolster media innovation in the entire East Africa. So going deep into the rural Uganda for us was a pleasant surprise.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I think that just underlines what Alea was saying, that there is a hunger for different stories. We are not happy with just what is on the mainstream media. There is a hunger to hear something else, experience something else. So Alea, back to you. And then to Caleb, what would you say is your biggest success to date as the LAM Sisterhood, and at the same time, your biggest challenge? They don't have to be the same thing, but yeah, if you could mention one of each.
I mean, honestly, this is going to sound trite, but I think our biggest success is that we still exist and that we're here. And I don't say that lightly at all. We began in 2018. We came together in 2017. We did our first big show in 2018. And, we decided to register as a company because we wanted to do this professionally. And one of the biggest challenges is we are the ones who want to create the content. And at the same time, we're the ones who have to find the money and run the business and market it and, do all of that. And of course, content creation also requires the kind of quality that we produce, means that you really do have to put the time aside to develop it. And so the challenge becomes, how many ways can we split ourselves into 50? At the end of the day, it's money. That's really what it comes down to. And I think one of the wonderful things about the innovators in residence program is really you have a year of sort of a safety net where you can experiment with different things. There's a supportive environment where the failure doesn't have the most intense consequences in quite the same way. And there's an investment in a product. I wonder whether we would have survived in this way had we not been part of this program this year. I don't know the answer to that. I guess I answered both of them, but I will say the other thing that I think is really, the other thing I feel excited about is the work that we're doing right now. We have an extraordinary amount of work we have that's ongoing. We're developing a children's podcast at the Innovation Center called Cabrazans, which is taking the stories of extraordinary African women and mythologizing them for children, so that our little girls never have Superwoman on their tongues or Wonder Woman, but they have Makatilili Wamenza and they have Queen Zinga, and we have that ongoing. We've got a musical theater show that is being written with musical collaborator Wanja Wahoro around Field Marshal Modani Wakirima's life. We have the Brazen podcast. We have so much that's so exciting. And we're really looking forward to collaborations as well. So if you're listening to this, We're big on collaborative work. If any of this resonates with you, reach out to us. And that is the other big survival mechanism, is collaborations, because especially if you're small, it's one of the things that really helps you stay in the game.
Okay. Caleb, same question. Biggest challenges, biggest successes.
Thanks, Rose. I think I'll start off first with what our biggest successes are. And I would say it's simply just been the fact that we've had impact. We've reached almost 100,000 people since we started. We've been featured on IJNet. We've had meetings with very important people who come to us to ask us, like, oh, how do we do this? And we're like, oh, like, we actually think we know some of these things. And just the fact that people, say somewhere, oh, like, I read your newsletter, or I've seen your website, or I like your website, or heard about your work. And I think that's the very reason why we started, right? To make people see minority stories, right? In that way, to have it sort of pushed in their faces every single day, as they say, like shoving it down their throats. But I'll also just say generally that, like Aliyah said as well, probably the biggest success has also been being part of the Innovators in Residence program. And I don't say it because like Hesbon is here or because the Innovation Center is here, but because I mean it, right? And the fact that there's so much when you start out and you have a passion for something, you can often like neglect systems, right? But I think systems make passion work. Systems make a media organization work, and that's what we've been able to do. Like in the past year, being part of this program, whether it's like an ethical reporting guideline, or whether it's designing like what our video guidelines are, our text story guidelines, or whether it's even like a payment process. All of these things are systems, right? And if you're just there for passion, you can forget that these things are important, which the Innovation Center has been very helpful in teaching us, whether it's grant writing to get more funding, or creating a financial output or financial process. Just all of those systems make the work a lot easier. And I think especially for us, when you're placed in very slippery slope, like legally, and especially being on the continent as well, you need even more to have the systems, because we don't think that we're immune to like crackdown, or we're immune to governments. We know that one day they will come. And I think for us, the goal is just to be ready, right? We've seen them in like the small touches of like here and there, but we know we'll see them in a much bigger way soon. And it's important that we have systems to help us when these things happen. So I would say our biggest success is just being part of the program, and also just building systems that work and seeing them have an impact. Biggest challenge, on the other hand, would be, I'd say, the fact that it's great to us that we're building a generation that's more aware, but I wish that more people wouldn't like tiptoe around the stories we tell, especially at like policy level, or at like even within the media spaces we're interacting with, right? Just for instance, when we talk about studying our content, or partnering with news organizations to do more content, we hope more people will be open to doing more sexual minority stories on their media platforms, or doing more disability stories that are not inspirational, like in these platforms. And I think I wish people were more open, but again, that's sort of why we're here, right? To build an African generation that's more aware. That'll be our first challenge. Our second challenge, I would say, would be just the fact that we are trying to build something so big, and we're like our team is mostly part-time, so there's about 3 people who are full-time. So we need more people on full-time, right? But to have more people on full-time, you need to have money to pay more people to be on full-time. So I would say in so many ways, it's also money. But again, I'm thankful, like Leah mentioned, that we are in the Innovators Residence program, because they also give you some money to invest in your product, which is super important, because now we've been able to see, if this is what we can achieve when 3 of us are full-time, imagine if all of us were full-time, right? So I'd say just having the space to test things out, to fail, as she said, without having to face more consequences as we would in the real world is important.
Okay, thanks, Caleb, for that. And I like the aspect about systems and just making sure that there's a way in which you do things apart from the passion that runs your organization. And I think just to wind up, I would ask, what are your biggest lessons to date? I think that's already one of the biggest lessons about systems. I don't know if you have any other which you will also use as your final word. Yeah, we'll start with you, Caleb.
Thanks, Rose. I would say our biggest, or at least my biggest lesson for us to date is the fact that people are watching, and people say it all the time, and it sounds like all people are watching, but it's not a joke. People actually are watching. And for us, that's a good thing because we want people to watch, right? And it's just basically for me just showing up regardless every single day. And I always tell people that Minority Africa will never close, and I say it confidently because I don't see us closing. Even if we had zero operating budget, we would just post one story every other month, but we'll still be there because the goal for us is simply to wake up every day and that there's one minority story into the world today, whether anybody comes to it, whether they don't. So I would say just for me, it's always showing up, right? When it's not convenient, when it's convenient, when there's nobody visiting the website, when there are 50 people, when there's 100 people, just keep showing up every single day. For the big organization, I'll say what we've learned is, I guess, the need to sort of listen to our audiences. There are many ideas that we have, right? So many ideas come up every single day that we sit down and discuss. But we now know, for instance, that our newsletter is one of our best products because our audiences say so. They always reply and say, "Oh, I love it," and we sort of listen to them like on that. We know, for instance, that people want to access our site through, access our content through other means. So currently, we're partnering with, or in talks to partner with some industry leaders who can help us make our content available on USSD platforms. We're designing a podcast that we sort of want to put on like a USSD code, maybe style 538, somewhere that you can dial and listen to a podcast. And just the fact that people are asking, like, how else can people access your content beside your website, made us think about, oh, like we actually should be thinking of people in rural areas who don't have internet, right? So how do they come on? Especially because minoritized people generally are denied access or have restricted access. So it's more important for us to even design like ways that reach them exactly where they are. So I'll say those two lessons, first of which is people are watching, second of which for the media organization, I'll say is listening to our audiences and sort of tailoring, while still staying true to our regional course, but just tailoring our audiences to meet them where they want to be met.
Thanks for that, Caleb. Alea, same. What is your biggest lesson as LAM Sisterhood?
I think really the thing that has kept us grounded is always remembering who we are here for. That's just our number one. And when that remains your compass, then you kind of are clearer about which direction to go in, which ones are not for you, which ones are for you, how you show up, why you show up, how to gather the strength to show up, because sometimes it is tiring and difficult. That's the first one. The second is around intention. Trying as much as possible to be very intentional about the work that we do and the how. Process is very important to us. So, if in the process of creating the work we are harming, then that is a problem. Then the output of the work is not acceptable. And I think that's something that big media organizations could really learn from. And the third is we have this sort of line from a poem that we wrote for Field Marshal Muthoni Wakirima, which has entered my mind. So I'm going to say it because maybe there's someone there who needs to hear it. The line is, "This is bigger than you. You are bigger than this." And I think it's just kind of context is remembering that you are big and also you are small. And there's incredible freedom in that juxtaposition. And to really lean into that and help, use that framing if it's helpful.
I hesitate to add anything because both of you have given such deep thoughts. And yeah, just food for thought about showing up, listening to your audiences, knowing why you do what you do, and being intentional. And I think that's something that we can just carry and take with us. Hesbon, I don't know if you have a final word.
Sorry, I think I got kicked out at some point. Well, of course, I have a few final comments to make. It's great to hear the sentiments from Alea and Caleb, and the difference that the Media Innovation Center has made, and most importantly, the difference that they're making as content producers and reaching people outside there with information. Just two things that I may want to say. In East Africa, especially in Kenya, where we've done a study, there's a dearth of information to so many areas, which would essentially call news deserts. If you look at the top media outlets in Kenya, for instance, you realize that, especially broadcast, most Kenyans are informed by around 3 or so radio stations that are nationalistic. So much so that people in so many far-flung areas listen to content that does not speak to their local realities, but captures them with entertainment. And therefore, when we have these, innovators in residence targeting rural areas, when we have, Caleb and company look at, the minorities, when you have Alea tell stories in a way that targets and reaches, a new generation of content consumers, it's something that expands basically the mandate of the Media Futures Project to have an informed society. Today, as we speak, we have 1.86 billion websites, and information is almost everywhere. But we may need to ask ourselves as content producers, storytellers, and people who have a public interest dimension to what we are doing, what are we doing differently? And to what extent are we reaching the people who lack the information that they would need to make the best decisions about the surrounding areas that they live? And finally, let me just say that the Media Futures Project, through Aga Khan University as the lead, in partnership with DW Academy, of course, funded by KFW, and we have implementing partners in Uganda, Media Challenge Initiative, then we have Tanzanian Media Foundation and Media Focus Africa. We are open to supporting innovative ideas, especially ideas that, get into the trenches and make the society a lot more informed. Also, the media landscape in East Africa. So reach out to us. The Innovators in Residence is not the beginning and the end if you get in, but you can join our community. There's a lot going on in our community in terms of building capacity, expanding the robustness of storytelling and public interest journalism. Those are many comments, but thank you very much, Rose.
Thank you, Hesban, for your one comment, or many things in one comment. And I think a good summarizing question from Liseli is, she would like to know what keeps the panelists inspired to wake up and do this work. Both of you talked about showing up, doing this work. So what keeps you inspired to keep on doing it, as the final question? Alea or Caleb, either of you could start.
Okay. I think it's different things at different times. I think for me, the word really lies in beloved. Work that has made me feel beloved makes me want to also create work for others to feel beloved. And this being like that feeling of connecting, that connection, that's really something that I try and hold very close. And also the people that I'm in the trenches with. So as the A in the Lamb Sisterhood, there's the L, Laura, and Mora, the M. We show up as much for each other through this work. So even when I'm not inspired, I gather strength from them and from the women who came before me and the women that we do this work for.
Thank you. Caleb.
Quite similar to what Alea said as well, but community, I would say, both community and representation. So the fact that people feel ably represented when they come to a site is one. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel that we're actually doing something. And even if I always say, we're very, because I didn't mention earlier, we're very community-driven newsroom. Even if it's 10 people that really trust us and trust our work, that's important for me, right? I want to have people who feel like this is the site where I go to that I feel, I guess, favorite or beloved. And also just generally the fact that I see people become more increasingly aware, even myself, and I say that we're a newsroom of people who are from different minority groups, so we don't know everything about every single minority group. So I've learned so much about covering women's stories, for instance, by just being part of minority Africa. I've learned so much about disability stories, and I think that it's seeing people come and say, oh, like, I didn't know this before until I came to your site, or your site taught me this, or I saw this story that I really liked, or I was so happy to read the story. So just knowing that we're having impact makes me feel inspired every single day. And whether it's 10 people who feel impacted, or 20 or 1,000 or 20,000 or 30,000, impact is impact.
Thank you, Caleb. I think that you brought us back to the original point where we were talking about reaching out to communities, making people seen and heard. And I hope that for everyone in this audience today, that you are as inspired as I am from this session and from what our panelists have shared with us. Thank you so much for joining in with us. And just our next session will take place at 3 p.m. CAT. And this will be a workshop on growing reader revenue models in African newsrooms. So I think this will also be something interesting that we would want to follow up on. And this will be followed by Pod Meet with PodSave immediately after this session. And afterwards at 5 p.m. CAT, join us for the second evening of the exhibition website, of the exhibition hangout. So visit our website for more details. And yeah, that's it from my side, ladies and gentlemen. And that's all we have. Thank you so much to all the panelists and to the audience for joining us and for your insightful contributions and questions. And I hope we'll see you at the next session. All the best.
Sisi wenyewe ni mashujaa.
Nous sommes nos propres héros.
We are our own heroes.
Power to the innovators, the DIYers across the continent.
Power to you who push the doors wide open.
Power to you who've planted good seed on fertile African ground. We celebrate you. Thank you for joining us. Visit our websites and social media platforms to continue the conversation.